Hello, boys and girls. All right, Chapter 9, Lesson 3 for my fourth graders, Equivalent Fractions and Decimals. Equivalent fractions and decimals, all right? So equivalent, remember, it is the same amount but written in a different way, okay? It equals the same, but it looks different. So equivalent fractions and decimals. Once again, we are relating fractions and decimals. They are very good friends. Alrighty, so the directions for number 2 and number 3 say, write the number as hundredths in fraction form and decimal form. Okay, so you have to write 9/10 in fraction form and decimal form, but in hundredths. So I'm just going to equivalent fraction this guy, right? 9/10 equals how many hundredths? Well, what do you do to 10 to pop it up here to 100, right? Because you can multiply or divide to make equivalent fractions. So I'm going to make this 10 times bigger, right? 10 times 10 is 100. So if I multiplied my denominator by 10, what am I going to do to my numerator? Multiply it by 10 also. I got to treat those two the same. 9 times 10 is 90. So 90 hundredths is the fraction form, and then the decimal form, 0 and 90. I just write plain old 90, and I say 90, and then I say, okay, where did it end up here? In the hundredths place. That's the hundredths place value there. 90 hundredths. All right? All right, so let me look at number 3 here. 0 and 2/10. 0 and 2/10. You know what? I like to write it as a fraction first. 2/10. I'm just so used to fractions. Let's make 2/10 equivalent to a fraction that has 100 in the denominator. We're changing it to hundredths. Do the same thing. Times 10. What do I do to that too? I make it 10 times bigger. Times 10. 20 hundredths. So a fraction, 20 hundredths, and as a decimal, 0 and just write 20. And 20, did it end up in the hundredths place? Yes, it did. 0 and 20 hundredths. Beautiful. All right, so let's see here. Directions for 6 and 7. Write the number as tenths in fraction form and decimal form. So this time we're going backwards, right? The last couple we had to go from tenths to hundredths. This time we're going from hundredths to tenths. Luckily, 10 and 100 are some of my favorite friendly numbers. All right, I'm going to rewrite this down here. 10 hundredths, and the directions said to write them as tenths. So I need that in tenths. All right, so I am going to have to divide this time, aren't I, guys? I'm going to divide both of them by the same number. So 100 divided by 10 equals 10, doesn't it? And remember, I like to go backwards to check it. I always go 10 times 10 is 100. Check. Because multiplying is just comes into my brain more quickly. So I like to go backwards. 10 times 10 is 100 if I forget. Okay, so then up here, 10 divided by 10. So what times 10 is 10? Oh, that's right, 1. 1 times 10 is 10. Okay, so the fraction, good gravy, the fraction in tenths is 1/10. And then to write 1/10 as a decimal, 0 and 1/10. I told you, tenths and hundreds, they're beautiful things to work with. All right, so let's take a look at 7. I'm going to read this now. Just read the number 0 and 60. And then you're going to use the decimal place value word. 0 and 60. What's that place value? Hundredths. 0 and 60 hundredths. Okay, so let's go down here. 60 hundredths is equivalent to how many tenths? Well, I'm going to divide by 10 again. I'm going to divide by 10, divide by 10. Okay, what times 10 is 66? So 60 divided by 10 is 6. So we have 6 tenths. And to write that as a decimal, 0 and 6 tenths. Woohoo! All right, let's keep going. All right, down at the bottom here. 4 states have names that begin with the letter A. I didn't know that. 4 states: Alabama, Arkansas, Arizona, Alaska. Oh, there are 4 states. Okay. 4 states have names that begin with the letter A. This represents, now let's read this. This represents 0 and 8. What's that place value there? It's the hundredths, right? That's the hundredths place. So 0 and 8 hundredths of all the states. Write 0 and 8 hundredths as a fraction. So how do you write 8 hundredths? 8 hundredths. Love it! As long as you read these decimals, the fractions, they just come flowing out. 8 hundredths, oh, I can write that. 8 hundredths. All right, let's look at the lesson check on the back of the paper now, guys. So flip your paper over and we'll work on number 1. The 4th grade students at Harvest School make up 3/10 of all students at the school. Which fraction is equivalent to, well, I didn't say 0 last time. Which fraction is equivalent to 0 and 3/10? Now, just like I said before, guys, if you read that, you're basically saying the fraction. 0 and 3, what's that place value? Tenths. Well, let's see, 3/10. Look at my choices. Oh, look at choice A. Hello, 3/10. That's not 30/10. It's not 300ths. What would that look like? That would look like 0 and 300ths. So no to you. And 3300ths. Oh my goodness, where'd they come up with that choice? All right, friends, beautiful work. All right, so now a review of Chapter 8, Lesson 4. Again, we did this one last time, didn't we? But it's an important chapter. All right, let's see. Number 4. Marge cut 16 pieces of tape for mounting pictures on poster board. Each piece of tape was 3/8 inches long. How much tape did Marge use? Okay, let's see. This calls for a reread, doesn't it? So Marge cut 16 pieces of tape for mounting pictures on poster board. Okay. Each piece was 3/8 inches long. Okay. How much tape did Marge use? So she used 16 pieces, and each piece was 3/8 inches long. All right, so 16 sets of 3/8. 16 pieces of, right? 16 pieces of 3/8 inches. Okay, does that make sense to you? All right, so let's take a look at this. So it's a whole number times a fraction. Okay, I'm going to rewrite this. I'll write it down here. 16 times 3/8. Okay, so we have 16 pieces of 3 out of 8 inches. So let's multiply the 16 times the 3 because we have 16 of those 3 pieces. All right, so let's see. 3 times 6 is 18. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4. Okay, so there are 48 eighths of an inch. 48 eighths. Do you see 48 eighths as a choice? Nope. Because 48 eighths, that's a fraction greater than 1, isn't it? 48 eighths. So we have to think to ourselves, all right, if I have 48 eighths, how many sets of 8 do we have? How many 8 eighths do we have? Right? Because we can keep taking 8 eighths, and that's 1. 8 eighths, and that's another 1. So we're going to divide 48 by 8 and see how many of these 8 eighths we have, because every 8 eighths is an inch. I bet you already figured it out, didn't you? Right? How many sets of 8 are in 48? You know that, don't you? Right? You could write your 8s down too if you wanted to. 8, 16, 24. What comes next? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30, 32, right? 40. What's after 40? 8 more. 48. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we can make 48 eighths. Not we can make. Marge has 6 inches of tape. 48 eighths is equivalent to 6. Beautiful. Oh, I love the fraction review stuff. It's so good for you. All right, guys, do the rest of your homework and have an excellent night.